Patriots who are just like you.
Good morning, Getter friends.
We're breaking news, we're delivering the truth,
and we're doing it on Getter
every single day.
So don't wait. Download the Getter app now.
Sign up for free and be part of the movement.
It isn't just an app. It isn't just a social media platform. It's a community.
Happens when the fourth turning meets fifth generation warfare.
A commentator, international social media sensation, and former Navy intelligence veteran.
This is Human Events with your host, Jack Posobiec.
Christ is
Elon Musk, who is set to visit the Pentagon today. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says it's, quote, an informal meeting about innovation, efficiencies, and smarter production. But last night, President Trump took to his social media platform to slam reports from the New York Times that Musk's visit would actually include a briefing on a potential war with China.
This started with this New York Times headline, and they since changed it, but Musk set to get access to top-secret U.S. plan for potential war with China. This is egregious. This is fake. The New York Times should retract this story.
The Houthis are pirates. They are not a recognized regime. They are not a recognized government. They are effectively holding Yemen hostage, and that's what they've been doing with the waterway there, is attacking shipping, attacking our ships over 100 times.
Russia is claiming Ukraine targeted a key airbase in a massive drone attack overnight. Russia's defense ministry says it shot down 54 drones over the area, while Ukraine says one person is dead and dozens injured after Russia launched missile and drone strikes across Ukraine. It comes after both Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky and Russian President Vladimir Putin agreed to a limited ceasefire following talks with President Trump.
Russia's military is still here in force, still fighting just miles away. And we find U.S. military hardware incinerated.
For 7 months, they held hundreds of miles of territory in that direction. It was all for nothing.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard today's edition of Human Events Daily. Here we are live in Washington, D.C. Today is March 21st, 2025, Anno Domini. It is also Tanya Tay's birthday, so happy birthday, sweetheart. I love you a lot. And so when we're breaking down, though, all the things that are going on, look, you got Elon Musk over at the Pentagon today, and the New York Times last night dropped this piece, and it was all over Drudge Report. The entire media lost their minds. He said Elon Musk is getting classified briefings on the war plans with China. Elon Musk is getting classified briefings on the war plans with China. Now, there's a couple issues with this, right? So first of all, one of the issues could be, for example, I don't know who is leaking at the Pentagon to the Wall Street Journal, to the New York Times, to everybody else out there. Leakers need to be found, caught, arrested, and prosecuted. And there was already one FBI agent who was caught and arrested for classified information, but there needs to be more. This is ridiculous. It has to stop now. And let me tell you something. This is the type of thing that hamstrung the first Trump administration, the 45 administration, this type of leaking of classified information to the New York Times. Why is anyone at the Pentagon going to the New York Times, picking up that phone or texting or whatever it is and calling to them and saying that this is what's going to be going on? And, oh, by the way, this is the classified briefing that Elon is receiving or any others. First of all, Elon has security clearance already. So and by the way, if people are worried about Elon, I don't know, doing something to harm the United States, well, he already could. Why? He has the largest rockets in the world, you idiots. He could already be doing stuff like that, but he's not. And of course he's not going to, because he is an American patriot. He's been given clearance. He's been given all of the operational ability for years when it comes to this stuff. And he's never threatened anyone with this. He's never stepped outside the law. He's never done any of these things. What's going on is very clear. Okay. There is a coordinated effort of hate and violence and deranged lunacy targeted at Elon Musk. And there are people within the Pentagon of the United States that are perpetuating it right now. This is 2 minutes hate. just like we saw in 1984 George Orwell. You must hate Elon Musk. You must hate Elon Musk. You must destroy Teslas. You must blow up Teslas. You must burn Teslas, the Tesla terrorists. This is all part of the same thing. And if you read my book, Unhumans, last year, we explained what was going on. The left does not exist to want equality and justice. They exist to want to tear down anyone who is a white, Christian, male, affluent success because they want to tear down the very core and fabric of American civilization. We'll be right back. Human Events continues.
What America First truly means. Welcome to the second American Revolution.
All right, folks, we're back live, Human Events Daily. So, look, you know, we've got the shot up, and by the way, I want to welcome in, of course, third hour of the Charlie Kirk program here on the Salem Radio Network, and special thanks to Salem for the announcement earlier this week. I really appreciate that, and we're going to be very honored and privileged, and we take it as a responsibility to be here every single day. But that shot, can we get that live shot up back up, guys, of the Jefferson? So this shot, all right, this is the I want to just talk about this real quickly because this is a huge thing. Washington, D.C., Japan donated those cherry blossoms over 100 years ago to the Jefferson Memorial, and they haven't bloomed yet. But if we can switch it to the shot at the White House, go switch it over there. Boom. I called this out the other day. Apologies to anybody who's listening on the podcast or the radio. You have to watch. You have to go back and watch the show on Rumble or YouTube to catch what I'm talking about, because there are these beautiful cherry blossoms. They're starting to come in right in front of the White House. You're going to see those. You're going to see the magnolias come in very soon. There's only about a 1 week window where you can see this in Washington, D.C. So if you have the ability, go down and check it out. So today's Tanya Tay's birthday. We usually go around her birthday, but I'm looking at the Jefferson Memorial and I'm saying, it's just not quite there yet. So we're probably going to end up going next weekend. I believe next weekend is going to be peak bloom. And that's it. You only get 1 week of them. That's the whole point of it. There's only 1 week. So you go down, it's an absolute mob scene. And believe it or not, when I was there last year, the SPLC sent one of their apparatchiks to go and stalk me when I was with my family. And I was doing like a live stream video, and I was joking around. I was about Trump winning, and then a group of Chinese tourists came up, and I started saying Trump won the election in 2020 in Mandarin, and they got so upset with me for saying this, and then they also started claiming that I didn't really speak Mandarin. I'm like, well, it's right there on video. So this is the level the left will go, and they were also very, very upset about a book I wrote last year. And that book was called Unhumans, The Secret History of Communist Revolutions and How to Crush Them, which you can purchase at unhumansbook.com or Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever you want to go. Let me tell you why this is important. You heard about the Tesla terrorists who've been going around attacking anyone who owns a Tesla. Now, the reason they're so upset with Teslas is because, remember, Teslas being an electric car, this was the climate-friendly car. It was left-wing coded. But so who bought all the initial Teslas were the lefties. But then Elon Musk went, AOC even had one. Remember, AOC was all excited about her Tesla, la, 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 look at me, look at my Tesla. But then Elon Musk went and joined the dark side. Again, you have to understand leftism from their perspective. And if you understand leftism from their perspective, this all makes sense. So him making the move, him making the switch to the dark side, choosing evil, means they must lash out because they view themselves as the heroes. They view themselves as the great leaders of society that's going to save society from the evildoers. But here's what's going on deep down inside of leftism. And this is what the book on humans teaches you. Deep down inside, they are animated by resentment. Resentment of people like Elon Musk, resentment of people like Donald Trump, people who are successful, people who are affluent, people who have actually made their mark in building something for Western civilization, building something for society. And so because they fall into designated enemy categories, and we discovered a playbook that's actually been used for hundreds of years, going back to the French Revolution, that if you fall into that playbook, if you fall into that designated enemy category, well, guess what? You can be destroyed, your business can be destroyed, your family can be destroyed. And guess what? They killed the entire ruling family of France. They killed the entire ruling family of Russia. They killed people all over the place in China, just slaughtering people left and right. Why? Because they fell into the category of the enemy. And then, of course, they did the exact same thing all throughout Spain until a man named General Franco stopped them. That is why we have Franco Friday today. So understand, animating all of this on the left is not equality, justice, equity. No. It's hatred. It's resentment of you and people like you, and they will stop at nothing to stop you. I want to bring on now our next guest, the executive director of the Foundation for Freedom Online. His name is Mike Benz. He is not in a suit today. He is wearing a collared shirt, a very nice golf shirt, but that's okay because I'm not in a suit either. What's up, Benz?
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing well. So, Benz, we've been going through our theory of the case for a couple of weeks here regarding the U.S., Russia, Ukraine, all the rest of it. And I wanted to get you on today to do a deep dive on all of this. We call it Trump's geopolitical grand strategy. And the Trump's geopolitical grand strategy is something that I don't think a lot of people get because they want to look at this in terms of just Ukraine, Russia, Ukraine, Russia, Ukraine, Russia. Russia started the war in 2022, so Russia has to be punished. How dare you talk to him? How dare you do this? They can't actually see the bigger picture and look at the chess pieces on the board. So, Benz, I was hoping today that we could sort of do a deep dive on all of this because people don't understand the factional warfare that's going on now at the elite level and what President Trump is doing. And by the way, the Department of Education push, well, that is cutting off the supply lines to the liberal elites of the United States. That's cutting off their resources and their access to an unlimited supply of capital and an unlimited supply of money towards the enemies of the republic. So it's very obvious to me what he's doing, but I think we need to lay it out for people. What do you say?
I say that sounds fantastic. One quick thing on the Department of Education. It's not just the elites in the U.S. educational sphere. I was reading the JFK files last night, and there's a passage where the CIA admits that they had been funding a group called the World Confederation of Organizations of the Teaching Profession, and that they had also been funding the National Education Association. And those are respectively some of the largest teachers unions in the United States. They're both alive and well today, and they both have hundreds and hundreds of international branches in foreign countries who receive money through the Department of Education's International Affairs branch, just as the AFL-CIO's international unions get money through the Department of Labor's International Affairs branch. And I was going on their contemporary website, and I noticed that the international branches were all complaining. They have a democracy section in their website, these historically CIA-funded teachers union groups. And the international branches were all complaining about Trump trying to shut down the U.S. Department of Education. And I think that, this is what's happening also in Ukraine. Why did Randy Weingarten, since we're going to be talking about Ukraine so much, why did Randy Weingarten spend, the head of the American Federation of Teachers, spend so many trips abroad in Ukraine? You put her bio as a Ukraine flag. And then you look, and lo and behold, the group that was CIA funded during the 1960s, the World Confederation of Organizations of the Teachers Profession, changed its name after the CIA funding event happened. It's now called Education International, and it's very active in Ukraine. In fact, they just gave their sort of Man of the Year award to one of the teachers in Ukraine. And I think...
And just a minute before the break, but I want people to understand that what Ben's is explaining here is this is network creation and elite formation. So how do you form the elites of countries that you want to control, or governments that you want to control? Well, you'd use programs like this. You would use soft power to then promote the people who are either pliable or on your side, who agree with you. You put them in positions of power. You then keep building that out so that no actual dissent, no actual patriotism, or any other individual can become successful, because you are funding literally the opposition in every single one of these countries that then becomes the government of those countries. And guess what? They're already in your back pocket because they always were. That's the reason for these things. And he's pointing this out. This goes all the way back to the JFK files. The networks are all still in place. That's why they kept this thing classified for so many years. It's all the same thing. And who better to break it down than Mike Benz, who's joining us here on Human Events Daily, Real America's Voice and the Salem Radio Network. Be right back.
Bates here with your Real America's Voice News Break. Thanks so much for being here with us. President Trump is ordering Education Secretary Linda McMahon to start the process of dismantling the Department of Education. Quote, to the maximum extent appropriate and permitted by law, take all necessary steps to facilitate the closure of the Department of Education and return authority over education to the states and local communities. That's what his long-awaited executive order on Thursday boils down to.
Sounds strange, doesn't it? Department of Education, we're going to eliminate it, and everybody knows it's right. And the Democrats know it's right, and I hope they're going to be voting for it because ultimately it may come before them. Title I funding and resources for children with special disabilities and special needs, they're going to be preserved in full and redistributed to various other agencies and departments that will take very good care of them.
Under the order, some of the Department of Education's functions would also be moved to other agencies. For instance, Secretary McMahon says since the Department of Justice has a civil rights office, there may be an opportunity to move civil rights-related education issues to the DOJ. The Trump Justice Department has a Tuesday deadline to respond to a federal judge's request for an explanation about its failure to bring deported Venezuelan gang members back to the United States after their deportation flights were temporarily blocked. District Judge James Boasberg's order on Thursday escalates his dispute with the administration, which already includes President Trump's call for Boasberg's impeachment and the filing of actual articles of impeachment against the judge. The latest request comes after the judge ruled on Thursday that the administration's current response to what happened after his order blocking the deportations is, quote, woefully insufficient. Saturday, Judge Boasberg imposed a 2-week ban on any deportations under the 1798 Alien Enemies Act. Despite the decision, 3 planes filled with deportees left the United States for El Salvador. ICE officials say the planes were already in the air when that ruling was handed down. The judge believes his order may have simply been ignored, though.
Today, they talk about influencers. These are influencers, and they're friends of mine. Jack Posobiec. Where's Jack? Jack, he's done a great job.
All right, Jack Posobiec here. We are back live, Human Events Daily, Washington, D.C. Folks, listen up, because I'm about to put you onto something that'll change the way you start your day. Blackout Coffee isn't just coffee, it's a wake-up call. A call to rise and grind, to push harder, and to never compromise on what you stand for. This isn't your average cup of joe. Every bag of Blackout Coffee is roasted with purpose, packed with bold flavor, and fueled by the kind of values that built this country: grit, determination, and refusal to back down. I had mine this morning, if you could tell. They don't just make coffee, they make a statement. Blackout Coffee is stepping up, adding more warriors to get your orders out faster than ever. So when you hit that order now button, you know your coffee's coming fresh and ready to fuel your next move. Whether you're powering through the daily grind, chasing big goals, or just refusing to settle for mediocrity, Blackout Coffee has got your back. Don't just drink coffee, drink Blackout. How do you get some? Secure yours at blackoutcoffee.com/POSO, and Patriots use promo code POSO for 20% off your first order. Taste the coffee that doesn't just wake you up, it fires you up. That's blackoutcoffee.com/POSO. I want to bring Mike Benz back in here to kind of We're going through, we're connecting a lot of dots here, and that's what we do when we bring Benz on, because he's a great dot connector, because it's, and Benz, it's amazing, right? People don't understand that cutting the DOE is actually about cutting the free flow of resources to not just the elite here in the United States, the liberal elite, but also the global Atlanticist elite that exists throughout Europe, and particularly in Western Europe, that is now trying to dominate Eastern Europe. Benz, does President Trump, he clearly understands this strategy. He clearly understands what he's doing here in terms of network disruption. Do you think that's the reason that he doesn't quite sit there and walk people through it the way that it is? Or is it just that he's operating so quickly that he doesn't want to waste time?
I think he's operating so quickly that he doesn't want to waste time. But the fact is this sort of sneaky tentacles of the blob in so many of the different agencies really has to have a full review, because we were just talking about the role of the teachers unions. The American Federation of Teachers, which is Randy Weingarten's outfit, has been partnered with NewsGuard and has been censoring conservative news in the schools. They participate in street protests to shut down cities. They try to hamper the administration from every angle. And the Department of Education is on the teachers front, but there's also the Department of Labor on the union front. And before I came on, I heard you talking about the Tesla takedown activity, which is being organized at the union level in significant degree. Unions play a huge role in the rent-to-riot affairs of the Central Intelligence Agency. For example, the JFK files are absolutely littered with AFL-CIO references. That the AFL-CIO is the single largest confederation of unions in the entire United States, and it has been CIA penetrated for 60 years. And then it's got these international affairs branches, which were behind the push to oust Bolsonaro in Brazil and to back Lula. AFL-CIO effectively did a jailbreak of Lula and were one of the closest partners of the CUT union in Brazil, which is the main union backing Lula that Lula basically was birthed from. And time again, you see these street protests. The AFL-CIO, we now know because of the Molly Ball article after the 2020 election, had a signed agreement with the Chamber of Commerce to unleash itself to shut down D.C. if Trump had won the Electoral College in 2020. And yet the AFL-CIO's spindle branches get tens of millions of dollars every year from the Department of Labor's International Affairs branch. And what we see is beyond U.S. aid, which unfortunately now the fight is still ongoing because a federal court has reinstated U.S. aid just this week. And then beyond that, just yesterday, a federal judge has now prohibited the Trump administration's pick to be the technical administrator at USAID because he previously worked at Doge. They wanted to move a Doge person to effectively be the technical head of USAID. And the federal judge said, I won't let you do that. So, but beyond just USAID, virtually every federal government agency branch has an international affairs bureau, which works with the State Department, which works with USAID, which works with the intelligence services. And it is the international affairs branches that will snake you every single time. And every government agency's international affairs branch needs an independent audit right now.
Absolutely. We're coming back. Quick break. Mike Benz. We're here for the deep dive. Trump's grand strategy. Be right back.
America's Voice News Break, I'm Terrence Bates. President Trump is ordering Education Secretary Linda McMahon to start the process of dismantling the Department of Education. In his order, he says, quote, to the maximum extent appropriate and permitted by law, take all necessary steps to facilitate the closure of the Department of Education and return authority over education to the states and local communities. That's the long and short of his executive order that was signed on Thursday.
Sounds strange, doesn't it? Department of Education, we're going to eliminate it, and everybody knows it's right. And the Democrats know it's right, and I hope they're going to be voting for it because ultimately it may come before them. Title I funding and resources for children with special disabilities and special needs, they're going to be preserved in full and redistributed to various other agencies and departments that will take very good care of them.
Under the order, some of the Department of Education's functions would be moved to other agencies. For instance, Secretary McMahon says since the Department of Justice has a civil rights office, there may be an opportunity to move civil rights-related education issues to the DOJ. And while part of President Trump's motivation for closing the Department of Education is improving the U.S. standing in global education rankings, a secondary reason is improving government efficiency. The latter extends to the Internal Revenue Service as well, as a member of the Elon Musk-led Doge team claims that he has canceled technology modernization contracts worth $1.5 billion at the agency. Tech startup executive Sam Korkus says that he found legacy contracts with outside technology consultants that were worth tens of billions of dollars, but the system upgrades being paid for were decades behind schedule. Plus, there are institutional concerns that were uncovered. Well, that's going to do it for your headlines. As always, we appreciate having you along for the ride. I'm Terrence Bates. Now, let's get you back to your regularly scheduled programming.
And Jack, where's Jack? Where's Jack? Where is he? Jack, I want to see you. Great job, Jack. Thank you. What a job you do. You know, we have an incredible thing. We're always talking about the fake news and the bad, but we have guys, and these are the guys who should be getting Pulitzers.
All right, Jack Posobiec, here we are back live, Human Events Daily. We're on with Mike Benz, the Foundation for Freedom Online. When we last left you here, Human Events Daily, Real America's Voice, want to bring in that Salem radio audience as well with Hour 3, Charlie Kirk. Benz was telling us about how the international arms of these various departments, and certainly it starts with the Department of Education, but it's not just them. These international arms, many of which are in cahoots with Soros operations and other globalist operations all around the world, they're actually funding what they would call, what the left would refer to as affinity groups or like-minded organizations, those either in power, whether it's Western Europe and areas where they control, or possibly dissident opposition groups if it's areas that have, like Eastern Europe, where you typically see a lot more conservative control of governments. That's when they'll go and work with these other affinity groups. Benz, talk to me about some of the other departments that the Trump administration and particularly DOJ should look out for when it comes to this type of operation.
I think every single one. We just talked about the Department of Education. The Department of Labor is absolutely massive in this. I personally uncovered tens of millions of dollars of grants to the most anti-Trump, most anti-White House agenda unions in the world, especially the situation in Brazil and abroad in Europe. But on the Ukraine front, I've not done a mapping of how many of the teachers' organizations or how many of the unions in Ukraine are getting federal funding through the Department of Labor or through the Department of Education. But I suspect the amount is massive. If you want to pull up on screen, if it's helpful to look at, because there's an Atlanta Council piece from December 2020 called "Ukraine's Education Reforms Are at Risk of Politicization." And I
remember this. I actually remember when this came out.
Yeah. Now, I was at the State Department at the time, and I was a deputy assistant secretary in the cyber branch of the Economic Affairs Bureau, and so this was not directly my beat. But as a DAS, you get traffic that's not classified, but just to give you peripheral awareness of what other bureaus are doing and what issues are sensitive at the time. And at the time, I can tell you, the State Department was concerned that Ukraine was going to try to become sovereign again in its education system. See, after we toppled the government in early 2014, and Senator Chris Murphy bragged about this, the Maine senator Democrat from Connecticut, who has been leading the charge to kill Doge and to stop the shutdown of USAID and to stop the reforms of the intelligence services. He's on tape on live television bragging that the 2014 coup of the Yanukovych government in Ukraine, which was a democratically elected government, would not have happened without U.S. intervention. He said it only happened because of our sanctions and our pressure on the organization and our support for the people on the ground. I mean, that's a signed, sealed confession, I'm yours, so to speak, that this was a U.S. coup, and it's from the guy who's leading the effort 10 years later to save U.S. aid. So what does that tell you? But the fact is after the 2014 coup, we imposed mandatory reforms to the education system, to the teaching system inside of Ukraine, and this is stock standard. We effectively have a set of checklist items whenever we topple a government in order to reform it, which includes privatization of its national assets. We call this economic reform. We put the entire judicial system through a series of reforms so that they have no autonomy over their own judges and courts. We put them in the hands of independent bodies and independent associations. Of course, they're never independent. They're dependent on the U.S. government for funding and usually on the U.S. Embassy for direction on what to do. So we control the judges, we control the prosecutors, we typically control the unions through a combination of USAID, the National Endowment for Democracy, Solidarity Center, and the Department of Labor's International Affairs branch. But the Atlantic Council, I remember very vividly when this happened. The Ukrainians were forced after 2014 to transfer effective control over their own Ministry of Education to an EU governing body so that it would be free and clear of any sort of Russian influence. Now, mind you, this is 8 years before there was actually a war in Ukraine. But it was immediately post-coup. If folks remember, the New York Times reported immediately post-coup, I think one day after the 2014 government was deposed, the Central Intelligence Agency took effective control over the Ukrainian intelligence services. This was publicly reported by the New York Times. But the Atlantic Council's this paper here from December 2020, and I remember getting recommendations about what to do. And one of the things that was recommended, and this was not recommended in-house at the State Department, I should say, it was an outside think tank, which proposed that if Ukraine's parliament went through and voted to take back sovereign control of their education system, that we could freeze their assets that were held in one of the Federal Reserve banks. I forget if it was the New York Federal Reserve Bank or the one in Atlanta. But the fact is the State Department was getting outside recommendations that we might want to seize their assets, threaten to seize the assets that they keep in U.S. banks if they simply get control over their own curriculum again. At the time, the State Department was fearful that Ukrainians were only motivated to take back control of their education system because they were unhappy with Western-style education. They were unhappy with the mandatory curriculum teachings on civic literacy that effectively purged their own history, that put a ban on the use of the Russian language while half of the country spoke Russian, that implemented all these reforms that the Ukrainians didn't like, and we have effectively strong-armed them in order to keep control over what's inside the minds of their little baby boys and girls.
And I was actually having a conversation with Joshua Lysek earlier today, the co-author of On Humans, about all this. And we were talking about fourth generation warfare, and these are all fourth generation warfare tactics that were used against all the target populations that you're talking about. And I said something about, I said, well, fourth generation warfare is so incredibly powerful. That's why it's so useful even here in the United States, like for elections and various things. And he said, yeah, fourth generation works right up until the point where someone decides to use third generation warfare back. And that's basically the start of the Ukraine war, where the Russians finally got to the point where they said, look, we believe we've been provoked enough. We believe that you are preparing to bring NATO into the country. Of course, they're talking about that right now with Keir Starmer. Apparently, King Charles sent some letter to President Trump about this, asking for British troops, and Macron is talking about bringing French troops into Ukraine. And this is exactly why the war started. So it stayed fourth generation warfare right up until the point where it went back to third.
Yeah. And the fact is we could. I made a tweet about it a year ago, which said something like, this whole war could come to an end if the U.S. simply apologized for overthrowing the 2014 government, because that is what set the stage for this whole Ukraine affair. The fact is, the U.S. was very much treating Ukraine as a war state 8 years before the war. Trump was impeached in 2019 over even potentially vaguely threatening to withhold U.S. military aid to Ukraine. Why do we need U.S. military aid to Ukraine if there was no war in Ukraine? The fact is they were seizing back the territories in eastern Ukraine that had broken away from the Kiev government after the coup, that virtually the entirety of Western Ukraine spoke Russian, and the U.S. State Department imposed, through things like the Red Lines memo and direct pressure from the U.S. Embassy, as well as we're seeing in the educational reforms that were implemented, that they weren't even allowed to speak their own mother tongue. Half of the country was banned from speaking their native language. I mean, imagine the outrage, for example, if the government of Mexico organized a coup against Donald Trump. Half the country is Donald Trump supporters, and then the new installed president of the United States banned the English language and mandated everyone speak Spanish. Right. You're almost forced to take to the streets and protest. You're almost forced, if you're living in a state like Ohio or Pennsylvania, to defect from the union, because you're not even able to speak the new national language. While you're already massively enraged at the coup you just watched take place.
It's amazing because the things that you're talking about, borders, but also language, culture, history. See, the elites, by the way, that we've been talking about in the Department of Education, they don't understand any of that stuff. Right? They don't ever go to the level of saying, oh, well, this is important to this group of people, and this is why, and these are the social mores, these are the connections, the ties, the tissues. They just view the lines on the map, and they have almost a comic book, Marvel movie, kindergarten kind of view of the world, where, well, this is one country, and this is another country, and this is where this country stops, and this is where this country starts. And yet, obviously, things like language are a great indicator of this, right? So you see this with French Canadians, by the way. That's one of the big reasons that Quebec has talked about breaking away from Canada over the years, is because they have a cultural and historical affinity to France. When you go there, you will hear them speaking French. Even to this day in Canadian politics, if you want to hold office, you have to speak both, even though it's really only one province that speaks this. But again, these are the things these are the ties that bind. These are the ties that bind. That's how the world works. That's how the world has always been since, the Tower of Babel. And it is not going to be changed because some professor said it ought to be.
Yeah,
1 minute till the break.
The elites don't care, as you mentioned, and they haven't been forced to care because they've always presupposed they can just run them over. It doesn't matter what they think. It doesn't matter, how much of a burden it's going to be on them. They have no institutional power, so we can bowl them over. And they know that they've got the backing in the highest of places. For example, I mentioned the Atlantic Council and its role here in the education space in Ukraine. Well, the Atlantic Council has 7 CIA directors on its board. It gets annual funding from the Pentagon, the State Department, USAID, and the National Endowment for Democracy. They think, what are these little old Ukrainians are going to do? And then they found, to their surprise, in late 2014, that they decided to break away from the entire government and get backstopped by the Russian military. And their response was the new Cold War that we live in now.
Yeah. Language, culture, borders. God forbid I mention ethnicity. Oh no. Oh no. But yes, we're going to discuss it all here in Events Daily.
I'm gonna shoot them.
Stop! No! Иди сюда! Иди! Все, там еще прикрывай, смотри, там еще идут. Ложись.
James Scott Rees Anderson. I was British Army before, so when I left, got fired from my job, I applied on the International Legion webpage. My dad was away in prison, I see it on the TV. It's a stupid idea.
When I'm working long hours, I'm always listening to Human Events with Jack Posobiec.
All right, Jack Posobiec back, Human Events Daily, getting into our final segment here with Mike Benz on the show today. Benz, here's what I've tried to explain. And by the way, that clip that played for the Real America's Voice audience, that was a British volunteer being asked to put down his weapons, then taken into captivity in Kursk, which is Kursk Oblast in the territory of Russia. The Russians are on the move in Kursk, taking back the territory of that, the city and the forest there up to their border. Benz, what President Trump is trying to accomplish with Russia vis-a-vis this treaty with Ukraine, the peace deal, I keep saying what he's trying to do is actually pivot Russia so that rather than put Russia and China together and have them as co-belligerents against the United States, and by the way, with Iran, their ally in the Middle East, what he's actually trying to do is break up that relationship, effect a new Sino-Soviet split, achieve rapprochement the same way Kissinger did in the 1960s and 70s, although in the reverse direction, and then actually balance, not ally, but balance Russia against China, and then, of course, use their influence in the Middle East. Do you think that's what's going on, and why is it that the blob is so opposed to this?
I do. I think that's exactly what's going on. The blob is opposed to this on several grounds. The first is that they want to seize Eurasia. They want to seize all of Eurasia. The blob's North Star is 1993 through 1997. The end of history, the Francis Fukuyama end of history. Francis Fukuyama, who was the policy planning staff guru for both German reunification and for what is called today the economic rape of Russia. This was at a time when shock therapy was going on. Russia, the Soviet Union had surrendered effectively to the United States and asked for help to transition from communism to capitalism. And the U.S. government stepped in and effectively took control over the Russian economy and said, we'll help you become a first world economy just like us. And so USAID took the lead on that. This is in the 1990s, and USAID deputized the University of Harvard's USAID version. It was called the Harvard Institute of International Development, which got $500 million from the U.S. Agency for International Development to lead this. The head of the Harvard Institute for International Development was a man you may know. His name is Professor Jeffrey Sachs. At the time, he was a Harvard professor. Now he's at Columbia with Victoria Nuland and Mike Pompeo and Hillary Clinton. But Jeffrey Sachs
all of his best buddies.
Well, Jeffrey Sachs became a whistleblower in the Ukraine affair, and he recently testified to the European Union that when he was called to do the economic reforms of Ukraine after the 2014 coup, that he was told while he was walked around the square that the U.S. had orchestrated it and had funded the buses, the rent-a-riots that came in. And he just testified about that, to my knowledge, for the first time just last month. But Jeffrey Sachs has been leading the charge against this. I have to assume that's in good faith, because he's just seen enough at this point, just like Henry Kissinger himself, who advocated so much expansionism and then in his later years said it was a mistake to continue the expansion. But the fact is the Harvard Institute for International Development teamed up with George Soros's Quantum Fund. They received hundreds of millions of dollars from the U.S. government to do it. They got billions of dollars of first pass investments on cheap Russian fire sale properties. Essentially, these were formerly held in a horrible communist state, but nominally for the people of the Soviet Union. But all the assets were turned over to Wall Street in London on the cheap. They effectively bribed the Russian officials who were administrating it. They created
they were essentially stealing. They were essentially stealing these resources from Russia and then using it to line their own pockets. That's what was going on throughout the 90s. That's what you're seeing this response to. And the Clintons were in on it, raping them with both hands. Mike Benz, where can people go to follow you, brother?
Follow me on X at Mike Benz Cyber. I'm actually going to post clips from a recent lecture that I did on this exact topic later today.
Incredible. It's like I wish the show were 2 hours longer so we could get more of Ben's. Go follow him because you get the deepest dives around right there with him. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, you have my permission to lay ashore.
tried to shut them up.
There's no guarantee to free speech.
They tried to cancel them.
Deplatforming works.
They even threw them in jail.
Peter Navarro,
Steve Bannon,
now in prison.
But they couldn't stop them.
It's not a prison bill that will ever shut me up.
Welcome to America's Voice Live. Our Real America's Voice team is going places others won't.
We need to take cover that was incoming into Israeli territory.
To show you what they don't want you to see.
It's still a disaster. What's the latest?
They call these street releases. You've got hundreds of people being dropped off. It's getting worse.
We're the nation's fastest growing news program for a reason.
Real journalism. They're all marching down to the White House.
Sounds to me, Ben, like they won't be happy until Israel doesn't exist.
Real American news.
America is under chemical warfare attack. Fentanyl